Here I'm going to go over the heart diagram and how it does not look like the image pictured here. I suggest you get a clean sheet of paper out and a pen or pencil, because I want you to be able to draw a heart diagram. I'm going to go over kind of the, may seem like awkward way we're going to draw it, but I think it'll make more sense. So starting with just to get you familiar with the simple heart diagram. These are some of the basic components you should be familiar with. The atrium, the ventricle, some of the valves. But if I asked you to draw this, it's a little bit difficult. The orientation, where everything is located. So what we're going to focus on for our sketch or our drawing is not necessarily an anatomically correct picture of the heart, but a square heart. And what does that look like? Well, this is kind of a square heart diagram, so I think these are very helpful in the sense of understanding exactly how things look and where things are located. So I'll draw your attention to this image first. We see on the left-hand side here, RA and RV. You might think, well, didn't they label this wrong? Isn't this the left side? Why is this the right atria? Why is this the right ventricle? Well, that's simply because we're looking at oriented in the body. This would be the right side of the body and the left side of the body. So from our perspective, looking at the square diagram, this would be the deoxygenated. This left-hand side would be the deoxygenated side, or the right side of the heart would be deoxygenated. On the left side of the heart is the oxygenated blood. That's indicated in the red here. The top here is our pulmonary circuit going to the lungs. Then here's our systemic going to the body. So starting with that right atrium, that is receiving blood from the body, the deoxygenated blood from the body. So that's where blood is first entering at that right atrium. It's then passing to the right ventricle, where then it's going to be pumped out to the lungs. And you see our blue line becomes our red line. Our deoxygenated blood becomes red, even though in real life it's just different shades of red. After that blood comes back from the lungs, it's entering the left atrium. From that left atrium, it's going down to the left ventricle. This chamber of the heart has the greatest amount of muscle, because this left ventricle needs to pump blood out to the entire body. So we've got our right atrium going to our right ventricle, going to then the lungs, coming back from the lungs to the left atrium, and then to the left ventricle. Now we're going to make this a little bit more complicated. That blood that's coming into the right atrium, well, that's coming in the vena cava, so we want to label that. Then it's getting passed to the right ventricle. When it leaves the right ventricle, it is going to the pulmonary artery, where it's entering the lungs. After it gets oxygenated in the lungs, it returns to the pulmonary vein. Remember, arteries carry blood away from the heart. Veins carry blood towards the heart. This is oxygenated blood coming back into the heart at the left atrium. It's then getting past the left ventricle and going out the aorta to the rest of the body. Now, one last thing I want you to make note of and add to your square heart diagram are the valve names. So I want just back here for a second. From our right atrium to our right ventricle, I want you to label this as the tricuspid valve. Then after the blood leaves the right ventricle and heads to the lungs, before it goes out the pulmonary artery, it has to pass through the pulmonary valve. Then that gets oxygenated, comes back in the left atrium. As it travels from the left atrium to the left ventricle, it goes through the mitral valve. From that valve there, before it's pumped to the rest of the body there up the aorta, it has to go through the aortic valve. So make sure you have the atriums, the valves, and also the proper veins and arteries labeled. And in a square heart, I find that's the easiest way for students to understand. Once you have this completed, you should be able to look now at this image, the heart detailed image, and start to be able to put together all the different components there. I do want to make note that the atrioventricular valve here is sometimes that is what it's called here. See our tricuspid valve and mitral valve here. They do kind of go by two names. I think it's a little easier to tell them apart from the tricuspid here on the right atrium and the right ventricle, and the mitral between the left atrium and the left ventricle. Hopefully this is helpful in starting to understand the complexities of the four-chamber heart and the pathway blood takes through the heart as it receives from the rest of the body, goes out to the lungs, comes back from the lungs after it's oxygenated, and then gets sent out the aorta to all of the necessary components of our body.